Welcome back to At Home with Cathy. We are in episode 9 and we're back in the coastal room. If you've been following the series, you know I'm using chalk paint by Annie Sloan. We are trying to use all the colors, all the waxes, and all the finishes in the book, Color Recipes for Your Home. What we're doing in the coastal room actually isn't in the book. So we are going to do an example of, now some people would call this a driftwood finish or a rustic finish, weathered wood finish. But what we've done is we started with a bookcase that we pulled off the wall. It was painted this gray, very pale, which is almost exactly the same as Paris gray. But to get the weathered wood look, I needed to bring it back to kind of a wood color. So we're going to show you how to get this finish on this bookcase. And we have our recipe here for this room. We have pure white on the inside. We have cream, which we're actually going to use as one of the colors here in the distressing. We have Paris gray, which is the pale gray, really gives you that driftwood, weathered wood look. We also use a little bit of French linen. French linen gives us the browns again, but they're brown gray. And if you ever look at a piece of wood that's been outside, it does have a brown gray look to it. But depending on the wood, it could have light streaks, it could have a little bit of dark in it. So because it could have dark in it, we're going to use a touch of graphite, which isn't in our color chart, and Louis Blue to give us the contrast between a dark and a light, but a little bit of blue, which brightens it. Louis Blue is in our chart. Provence is what's on the wall. Orange is our punch color for this room, and Napoleonic blue is the trunk. We're going to go back to the trunk when we get to the end of this, the second half of this episode. So to start, I did a wash. I had a little bit of cocoa left in a can, so I did half cocoa, half water, gave it a really good stir, and I've done a light wash. I don't need a perfect finish on this. I actually want streaks. This top of this bookcase is beaten up. There are gouges in the paint. There are nail holes where it was attached to something before. That's all going to work to my benefit as I'm creating a weathered wood look. This is when little nicks and dents and things really don't matter. They just become part of the story. We don't always use the same brushes either, because quite a lot of what I'm doing, and you can see it here, is I'm dragging. I just want streaks. I don't want to really cover all of my cocoa with a solid coat of paint. So I'm going to work with a rag in one hand to kind of blend out what I'm doing. And I will use a brush for, say, the Paris gray, but I might blot it out a little bit. So we're going to start with Paris gray as our next color. And where did you go, Paris gray? Get a lot of colors here after a while. So we're going to go straight down. One thing when I'm doing the weathered wood look, I don't want to stop and start. If I only do a third of it, it's going to end up looking kind of chunky. I need to make it look as though this is all one piece of wood, one piece of reclaimed something from the beach or that you found from an old construction project that you forgot all about. I don't want a lot of paint. I'm going to use the edge of my can to dab it off. And I'm going to start, because I'm right-handed, I'm going to work from left to right, but you work on what's comfortable. And I'm just going to drag my brush. And you're going to see a little streak of paint. And I'm going to do it again. I might put a little more pressure on it in places because I want a little bit more of a grayed look. And I'm going to go right from the end. Now this wood is a little bit rough, so I'm going to get a little bit of the board, the saw marks from the board. Now I'm going to do a little bit of smoothing out. I do want a fairly good gray coverage here. If I think I have a little bit too much, I'll pull it back. Just pull it back a little bit. And I'm just going to go back over it again. You kind of can't mess this up. If you really don't like what you've done, you do another wash of cocoa and start again. You're not using a great deal of paint to achieve the effect either. So it's a wonderful way to use up little bits of paint. Make sure I do my front edge. And another little bit. Paint. A lot of construction going on in our neighborhood. You can hear the backhoe outside. So then stand back and have a look at it. I think I've got a little bit too much cocoa showing through down here. Going to do a little bit more Paris gray. And I like that. So now I don't really have to worry about that drying because I'm going to move right to the next color, which is my French linen. And because I don't want as intense a color, I give this a little bit of a stir. You do have to keep stirring your paints, especially if you haven't used them for a little bit, because the pigment in this mineral paint, which is what is the base of a chalk paint is going to settle out. So especially if it has a little bit of white in it, you're going to find that ends up on the top of your can, and you're not going to have the color you thought, a consistent color all the way through. So now I'm using a chip brush. This is just a little inexpensive, couple of bucks brush, and it's for dry brushing. To get a real dry brush effect, if I found that I had too much paint, I might even take a little bit more off the tips, but I'm going to go down here and I'm going to do the same thing. Oh, I might have taken a little bit too much off. I do want some effect from my dry brush. And I am following the wood grain. Just going over my Paris gray just a little bit. Just trying to create grains in the wood like you would naturally see in a piece of wood. When we first started this room, I was thinking this top might end up being in a cream color, and I mentioned that in the last video, but it seemed the more time I spent in here, cream wasn't going to be the color I was looking for. So that's very subtle. We're now going to go to graphite. Need a little bit of dark on here to give me some. I'm going to use the same brush. And with my graphite, I'm going to be a little bit cautious with it. I don't want a whole lot of this dark. This creates the illusion of a shadow in the wood, a little bit of texture. I have a kitty watching me over here. Probably wondering if he should be jumping on top of this to do a more thorough inspection. Now I have a little bit of imperfection in the wood here. That's a good place to catch a little bit more black. I can't hide it, so you know what? I might as well just exaggerate it. And wood isn't perfectly straight, of course. It goes off in little knots and bends and twists. You can see how fast this really does go once you start. I think the real trick is to do less, and you can always add more. Texture in that. Okay, so now the next color we're going to, for our purposes here, I want just a little bit of Louis Blue. I'm going to pick a fresh brush for that because I don't want the black to come through. And what I'm going to do with the Louis Blue is just lighten a little bit of the black. Plus, in this room, it is a blue room, and this is the Louis Blue gives me just a little echo of blue. Tiny little bit more front. Now, if I find it when I'm done that I have a piece that's a little bit too solid, I will take sandpaper and sand it back to give me, that's great because it just makes it look scratched. The last color we're going to put on here is cream. And the cream is doing the same thing as the Louis Blue, just creating a little bit more shadow by providing a contrast to the darker colors of French linen, cocoa, and graphite. And this cream has just, whoops, I don't want to use that one, I'm going to use the Louis Blue. The cream has just a little hint of yellow. Start down here. There's hardly any pressure on my brush. It's almost like I'm just dragging the brush. I'm not pressing down. I don't need a solid coat. I find sometimes the hardest part to do is the edge because to make that look natural. Let's go back and drag. The brush is almost dry. It hardly has any paint on it. There we go. Now, I have a nice big blue streak right here, so we're going to try and work that out. So now what I'll do is I will let this dry. Colors do change. They darken a little bit when they dry. So I would look at it again, and if I decide I have quite a solid blue streak here, if I decide I don't like that, I might take my French linen and go along and just blend that out a little bit. French linen or Paris gray would be a good color to just quiet down that little streak of Louis Blue. Gray it right out. But I think that's given us the effect we were looking for. So what we've done is we've created a driftwood or weathered wood finish to the top of this bookcase, and I will go along and I'll finish the inside here. I started to tape. I had done my white on the inside, and I want that nice clean line. So I'll put a piece of tape here and I'll do a weathered finish here, which will match the ends. And then when I stand back and look at this, I have a really nice weathered or driftwood effect on my bookcase. So let's move on and have a look at the trunk. So before we move on to the trunk, one of the things I talked about in the first video for this room was I was looking for something that would pull all these colors together. The colors we chose were quite vibrant, the oranges and the blues and the creams, and they needed something to bring them all together to make the story. Well, I went shopping for fabric for a futon cover, and this is what I found. This gorgeous piece of tapestry fabric is going to bring all our colors together. We have oranges, we have blues, we have reds, we have a little bit of black, we have some gold in here, and it's so vibrant that on its own it probably would be way too much in most rooms, but in this room, against the blue walls, it's going to be quite beautiful. So he's checking out the futon to see how it fits. This piece, because one of the things we wanted to do with the trunk was make it extra seating, this piece has like a sunset color, red shot through with gold, which creates an orange effect, which ties into that but gives us a different texture. and that will be used to cover cushions to sit on top of here to make it a little bit more comfortable. I found the bright orange to make a couple of cushions just to pop the color out, and that we're going to use on our table legs. And of course the blue that we started with, which is very similar to the blues on the walls, just a little more intense, is going to be used on the chair seats. So I have a little bit of sewing ahead of me, but that'll be a nice break from painting. So let's move on to the trunk. The trunk started its life as a black trunk, and these are old pieces of metal with the brass nails or rivets in here to hold it all together. And of course that was for strength when it was a steamer trunk. So we painted it in Napoleonic blue. I've clear waxed the whole thing, but it was missing something. So I'm just going to grab a piece of paper here. It looked a little bit too new. So what we're doing, and this is because I always get messy when I use brown wax, this is the dark wax. We clear wax the whole thing, and clear wax of course looks white until it dries, and it dries clear, and that you can see the shine on that. But to make the trunk look a little bit aged, give it a little bit of a worn look, I went around and I went over all of the nails or the rivets that are here using the dark wax. Everywhere there was a line or something, a detail that kind of popped out. And what that would do is, if we are making this look a little bit aged, this is where it would wear, is on those edges, because that's where, when it was being transported, that's where it would bump or be pushed. So I'm going to take that, and then before it has a chance to dry, because I don't really want it to be very dark, just a hint of darkness, I'm going to wipe it off. And all that's going to do is leave me with a little hint of wear. And actually it helps bring out the detail too of those nails. Maybe, I don't know if you can see, it creates a little shadow right there. So then the other thing about it was that this is a metallic band. Let you go. Not on the floor for you. So what we're going to do with this is gilding wax. Gilding wax comes in a small tube. This color we're using is warm gold. A little bit of this goes a long way. I'm just going to put a little bit on my finger, and I'm going to rub it in. I've gone all the way around the trunk, and I just chose the corners and the band of metal that wrapped all the way around. You can do this with your bare finger. I just find I'm getting so much paint on my nails all the time that my fingers don't look clean. I'm just going to rub it in. I'm pretty much staying on the line. Here. The gilding wax comes in 5 colors. This is the warm gold. There's a bright gold. And at first, when I was playing with it, I worked on the back of the trunk. The bright gold is too bright. It makes the trunk look new, and it's at odds with the age of the trunk. So I decided just to use the warm gold. There's also a copper and 2 silvers, and the silvers work much the same way as the gold. There's a bright silver and a duller silver. Ends up looking more like polished. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to do the last corner here, and then I did do both of those, both the corners on the front and the back. What this is also going to do is pick up on the gold in the fabric that I've chosen to make the cushions out of, so it's going to give it a little brightness. And then just around the metal that secures the leather handle. A little of this stuff goes a long way. Just on some of those nail heads, just a little bit too. Okay, then I'm just going to buff it out. So I've put this on after I've done my clear wax. This already has a coat of clear wax on it, and I found that made it easier because I can take out, you can see where there's a little bit too much of the gilding and it looks too streaky, but by clear waxing first I have more control. I can rub it out and get rid of the extra that's there and make it look more natural, make it look worn. I'm kind of rubbing the gilding color into the texture of the metal. Kind of fun to do this. It's like the icing on the cake. And this gilding wax will cure like our other waxes and just give us a nice finish on this old trunk. And that is as simple as gilding is. So that's wrapping up episode 9. When you come back, this room will be put together and we are going to play with art for this room. I've bought my big canvases, and to practice I've got small ones to start. So we'll play with that in a future episode. For the next episode, episode 10, we're going to look at color mixing. I've had a lot of people ask about that, color mixing. How do I have to buy all the paints to do what I want to do? So let's explore that, and we're going to work on a finish called Ombre. So we hope you join us at home with Cathy for the next episode. Thank you.